Hi everyone, I'm Ashley Perry and welcome to my case presentation. Today's title is When the Panel is Normal but the Patient Isn't. I promise by the end of this you'll have a new appreciation for mushrooms. Today we're going to work through a case together and your job is to play detective, so let's get into it. So we have 3 quick objectives before we dive in. By the end of this, you should be able to identify who's at risk for low intake of this micronutrient, understand what it actually does in the body, and connect dietary patterns all the way to agricultural practices. That third one is going to make a lot more sense by the end. I promise it is not as out there as it seems. Okay, so meet Margaret. She is 52, works as an office manager, and has spent the last 10 months feeling like her brain is running on dial-up. She's forgetful, mentally foggy by early afternoon, low energy, mildly weak, and has increasing irritability. Her symptoms were initially chalked up to perimenopause and work stress, which is fair, but that's not the whole story. Her medical history includes mild hypertension. She's managing this with lifestyle changes, a BMI of 27, and a family history of Alzheimer's on her mother's side. She exercises once or twice a week. She does not smoke and has an occasional glass of wine. She's doing a lot of things right, but something is clearly off. Here's where it gets interesting. Margaret's diet is a textbook standard American diet. Lots of fast food, 3 to 4 times a week, processed snacks, white bread, deli meats, sweetened beverages, nothing surprising there. But look at the right column. No mushrooms, no fermented foods, no organ meats, almost no legumes, no supplements. She's not consuming an entire category of foods, and that absence is going to matter a lot in a few minutes. So her doctor ran labs, and here is where it gets even more interesting. Everything on the standard panel, B12, folate, iron, vitamin D, thyroid, everything's normal. Clean across the board. But over on the right, her HSCRP is elevated. Her fasting glucose is 102, putting her close to the pre-diabetic territory. Her oxidative stress markers are flagged, and her cognitive screening shows a mild but real decline from her baseline 2 years ago. So she's inflamed, oxidatively stressed, cognitively declining, and her panel is spotless. Something is missing, and it's not on the standard panel. So I want to pause here and ask, what do you think it is? Her standard labs ruled out the usual suspects. Her diet is missing an entire food group most Americans never think twice about. Her symptoms fit a very specific pattern. Take your best guess before you click to the next slide. Have you guessed it yet? The answer is ergothioneine, and I've spelled it out phonetically there for you because it is tricky. Yes, I completely understand if you've never heard of it. Most clinicians haven't either, which is kind of the whole point. Ergothioneine is a sulfur-containing derivative of histidine, first discovered in 1909 in the ergot fungus, hence the name. We can't make it ourselves, we have to eat it. And yet our bodies have evolved a dedicated transporter just for this one compound, which is the body's way of saying it matters. Some researchers call it the longevity vitamin, others call it the stress vitamin. By the end of this, you should understand a little bit better. So how does it get in? Ergothioneine is absorbed in the small intestine through a very specific transporter called SLC22A4, also known as OCTN1. It's pH dependent, which means gut conditions affect how well it works. That same transporter shows up in the kidneys too, where it reabsorbs EGT to keep it from being lost in urine. Less than 4% is excreted. The body is holding on to it tightly. One more wrinkle is the gut bacteria have their own EGT transporter, meaning your microbiome may be competing with you for absorption. Gut health affects ergothioneine status. File that away. So once it's absorbed, ergothioneine goes basically everywhere. Red blood cells, bone marrow, liver, kidneys, eyes, brain, skin. But here is what makes it fascinating. The body appears to upregulate that transporter at sites of oxidative injury, actively pulling more EGT to wherever the damage is. It is like the body's own targeted emergency response. It also exists in the thione form at physiological pH, making it more stable than glutathione. So it does not just scavenge free radicals, it sticks around to keep doing it. Blood levels also naturally decline after age 60, which matters for risk. So, ergothione's core job is cytoprotection, protecting cells from oxidative damage. It scavenges reactive oxygen and nitrogen species more stably than glutathione. It activates NRF2, which is the master switch for the body's own antioxidant defense system. It chelates transition metals that would otherwise drive harmful oxidative chain reactions, and it protects mitochondria, especially in the neurons and cardiac cells. It crosses the blood-brain barrier, making it one of the very few dietary antioxidants that can directly reach and protect the brain tissue. And it preserves endothelial function, which is how it connects to cardiovascular health. Everything comes back to the same idea. Ergothioneine shows up where oxidative stress is highest and works to contain the damage. So, where do we get it? Mushrooms, almost entirely mushrooms. About 95% of dietary intake, actually. Shiitake leads at 24 milligrams per cup, followed by inaki, maitake, and oyster. Even basic white button mushrooms contribute smaller amounts. Smaller amounts exist in tempeh, fermented foods, organ meats, oat bran, and legumes. Now look at Margaret. No mushrooms, no fermented foods, no organ meats, almost no legumes. Her estimated daily intake is less than 1 milligram. Not because ergothioneine is hard to find, but because the one food category that dominates its supply is completely absent from her diet. That is years of near zero intake of a compound her brain depends on. So Margaret is far from alone. Several populations share this vulnerability. Older adults are the top of the list. Blood EGT naturally declines after 60, right when oxidative stress is actually already accelerating. Anyone eating a standard American diet faces the same gap that Margaret does. People with gut dysbiosis may absorb less even when they eat the right foods. Industrial soil tillage disrupts the mycorrhizal fungi that transfer EGT into crops. So someone eating conventionally grown vegetables may be getting less than they think. Food insecurity limits access to mushrooms for obvious reasons. And some people carry genetic variants in the SLC22A4 that reduce absorption efficiency regardless of their diet. Nutritional status is never just about what you eat. So, what does the science say about how much we need? Currently, nothing official. No RDA, no AI, no EAR. For a compound our bodies work this hard to retain, it's a little bit ironic. US intake averages below 5 milligrams a day, which is lower than several European countries that eat more mushrooms. And those countries tend to outlive us. Probably a coincidence, but probably not. EFSA declared 30 milligrams a day supplementally safe in 2016, and the FDA followed with GRAS approval in 2018. So we know it's safe. We just have not told anyone how much to aim for, which is a little bit problematic. As for testing, there's no standard clinical panel. Research uses LC-MS on whole blood or plasma, but there's no established reference range yet, which is a pretty accurate summary of where this entire field currently stands. The disease associations are striking, and this slide covers the full list, but a few stand out. Low EGT has been linked to cognitive decline, dementia, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's risk. One prospective cohort study found each standard deviation increases in blood EGT was associated with a 20% lower risk of coronary artery disease, 14% lower stroke risk, and 24% lower cardiovascular mortality. For one dietary compound, those are pretty remarkable numbers. And chronic inflammation, metabolic disease, frailty, and eye disease round out that picture. So look back at Margaret. She is checking nearly every box on this slide. That is definitely not a coincidence. So let's bring it home. Margaret's zero mushroom diet, elevated inflammation, pre diabetic glucose, cognitive fog, and family history of Alzheimer's all connect directly to what we just covered. The dietary fix is actually pretty simple. Shiitake or oyster mushrooms a few times a week, some tempeh, more legumes, and a conversation about supplementation. The bigger takeaway is in that dark box. A normal panel does not mean nutritional sufficiency. Ergothioneine is not on any standard screening panel, which means patients like Margaret could be chronically under consuming it without anyone ever catching it. That's exactly the gap we are being trained to close. I will add something personal here. Ergothioneine was one of my top choices for this project because my own oncologist recommended I supplement with it. That sent me down a research rabbit hole, and honestly, it is what made me realize how significant this compound might be and how little attention it gets in clinical practice. So, for something the body works this hard to hold on to, it deserves a lot more of ours. Okay, so here's our discussion questions. Question one is clinical. Margaret's panel was clean, yet she is clearly unwell. How would you argue for or against ordering a plasma EGT assessment, and what challenges come from having no established reference range? Question two is about diet. Given that 95% of EGT comes from mushrooms and US intake lags behind longer lived European populations, what practical and culturally sensitive strategies would you recommend for a patient like Margaret? And question three goes bigger. Industrial soil tillage depletes EGT in crops by disrupting mycorrhizal fungi. What role should RDs play in advocating for food system changes that protect nutritional quality at the population level? I'm so excited to hear everyone's responses. Personally, as a cancer survivor trying to make sure it doesn't come back, I try to eat different kinds of mushrooms every week to gain the benefits of ergothioneine. I really enjoyed this project, and good luck, everyone. Okay, so all the references are available here. They're all peer reviewed and worth exploring if this topic has piqued your interest. The field is moving really fast, and there is genuinely exciting research coming out right now. I really enjoyed this project, and thanks everyone for watching.